Title: The Bloody Darkness. Main story: Kevin and Melissa had just moved into their new house, an old Victorian-style building that had seen better days. It was a fixer-upper, but they were excited to take on the challenge of renovating it and making it their own. The house had a certain charm to it, with its high ceilings, intricate moldings, and large windows that let in streams of sunlight during the day. But as soon as they settled in, strange things began to happen. The first sign was the creaking floorboards in the hallway that sounded like footsteps. At first, they wrote it off as the house settling, but the footsteps became louder and more frequent as the days went by. Kevin and Melissa started to feel uneasy in their own home, and their once cheerful demeanor turned into one of anxiety and fear. One night, as they were getting ready for bed, they heard a loud banging on the front door. They rushed to see who it was, but no one was there. They brushed it off as kids playing pranks, but the banging continued every night at the same time. It became so unbearable that they decided to install a security camera outside the front door, but when they reviewed the footage, they saw something that made their blood run cold. A figure in a hooded cloak appeared on the camera, standing motionless outside their front door for hours on end. The face was shrouded in darkness, but its presence was enough to send chills down their spines. Kevin and Melissa were convinced that someone was stalking them, but they had no idea who it could be. Things took a turn for the worse when they started to notice strange markings on the walls. The symbols were carved deep into the plaster, and they seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Kevin and Melissa tried to cover them up, but they would always reappear the next day, more pronounced than before. As their fear grew, they decided to investigate the house's history. They discovered that it had been the site of a gruesome murder-suicide many years ago. The previous owners had died in the house under mysterious circumstances, and their spirits were said to haunt the premises. Kevin and Melissa tried to leave the house, but they found that they were trapped. The doors and windows wouldn't budge, and they were trapped inside with the malevolent presence that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. One night, as they were huddled together in fear, they heard a voice whispering in the darkness. It was the voice of the previous owner, warning them to leave before it was too late. But it was already too late. The malevolent presence had taken over the house, and Kevin and Melissa were trapped in its clutches. As the night wore on, the presence grew stronger, and the symbols on the walls pulsed with a sinister energy. Kevin and Melissa were consumed by fear and dread as the presence closed in on them. They could feel its cold breath on their necks, and they knew that they were about to meet a gruesome end. Suddenly, the room filled with blinding light, and the presence was banished. Kevin and Melissa were left shaken and terrified, but alive. As they stumbled out of the house, they saw a figure in the distance. It was the same hooded figure that had been stalking them, but now it was gone, banished by the light. Kevin and Melissa never returned to the house, and they never spoke of the horror they had experienced. But the memories of that fateful night stayed with them, haunting them for the rest of their lives. The old Victorian-style house still stands, a monument to the malevolent presence that once resided within its walls. Years passed, and Kevin and Melissa moved on with their lives. They tried their best to forget the horror they had faced in that old house, but they could never shake off the feeling that something had followed them out. One day, Kevin received a letter in the mail. It was from the previous owner of the house, the one whose spirit had warned them to leave. The letter explained that the malevolent presence had been a powerful demon that had taken over the house, and that it had been banished by a group of powerful exorcists. The demon had been summoned by a cult that had worshipped it as a god, and they had used the previous owners as a sacrifice to gain its favor. The cult had been destroyed, but the demon had lingered, feeding off the fear and negative energy of anyone who dared to enter the house. The previous owner had known of the demon's existence, but had been powerless to stop it. He had tried to warn the new owners, but they had not listened. He thanked Kevin and Melissa for banishing the demon, and urged them to be vigilant, as the demon would always be watching, waiting for its chance to strike again. Kevin and Melissa never returned to the house, but they could never shake off the feeling that they were being watched. They would often wake up in the middle of the night, feeling as if something was standing over them, watching them with cold, malevolent eyes. In the end, they moved to a different city, hoping to start anew. But no matter where they went, the feeling of being watched never left them. They lived the rest of their lives in fear, always looking over their shoulders, always waiting for the demon to return. And in the old Victorian-style house, the symbols on the walls continued to pulse with a sinister energy, a reminder of the horror that had once consumed it. The house stood as a warning to all who dared to enter, a testament to the power of darkness and the horrors that lurked just beyond the veil. But the darkness that had taken over the house was not content with just Kevin and Melissa. It hungered for more, seeking out new victims to feed its insatiable appetite. Years passed, and the house remained abandoned. But one day, a group of curious teenagers stumbled upon it, drawn in by the eerie legends surrounding it. They had heard that the house was haunted, that strange things happened within its walls, and they wanted to see for themselves. At first, they were hesitant to enter the house. But as they approached, they noticed that the symbols on the walls were pulsing with a strange, otherworldly energy. They were drawn in, as if by some invisible force, and they entered the house, eager to explore. As soon as they stepped inside, they knew that they had made a mistake. The air was thick with an oppressive, malevolent energy, and they could feel the darkness closing in around them. They tried to leave, but the door had slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. They wandered through the house, trying to find a way out, but they were hopelessly lost. The walls seemed to shift and twist, leading them in circles, and the symbols on the walls pulsed with an even stronger energy. One by one, the teenagers began to disappear. They were snatched away by unseen hands, dragged kicking and screaming into the darkness. The ones that remained were consumed by fear, their minds slowly unraveling as the darkness closed in around them. In the end, only one teenager remained, a young girl named Emily. She was the only one who had managed to avoid the grasp of the darkness, and she was determined to find a way out. As she searched, she stumbled upon a room that she had not seen before. The walls were covered in symbols, and she could feel the energy of the darkness emanating from them. But she also noticed that one symbol was different from the rest. It glowed with a soft, pulsing light, and she could feel that it held the key to escaping the house. She touched the symbol, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, Emily found herself outside, the house standing behind her like a silent sentinel. From that day on, Emily refused to speak of what had happened in the house. But the legends surrounding the old Victorian-style home continued to grow, and the darkness that had taken over it remained, waiting for its next victim to enter. Years went by, and the old Victorian-style house remained abandoned, a relic of the past. But the darkness that had taken over it had not forgotten, and it hungered for new victims. One day, a group of urban explorers stumbled upon the house, drawn in by the legends that had grown around it. They had heard that the house was cursed, that it was home to malevolent spirits that preyed upon those who dared to enter. They were thrill seekers, eager to explore the abandoned home and uncover its secrets. As they entered the house, they could feel the darkness closing in around them. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and the symbols on the walls pulsed with an ominous light. But they pressed on, determined to explore every inch of the cursed home. As they wandered through the house, they began to experience strange phenomena. Doors slammed shut on their own, objects moved of their own accord, and they could hear whispers coming from the shadows. But they refused to be scared off, and they continued to explore, eager to uncover the secrets of the old house. But they soon realized that they had made a grave mistake. One by one, the explorers began to disappear, consumed by the darkness that had taken over the house. Those that remained were paralyzed with fear, unable to escape the malevolent spirits that hunted them. As the darkness closed in around them, they realized that they had been foolish to enter the house. They had been warned of the horrors that lurked within, but they had not listened. And now, they would pay the ultimate price for their curiosity. In the end, only one explorer remained, a young woman named Sarah. She was determined to escape the house, to warn others of the danger that lurked within. She searched frantically for a way out, but the darkness seemed to have closed in around her. Just as she was about to give up hope, she stumbled upon the room that Emily had found years before. She saw the symbol on the wall, glowing with a soft, pulsing light, and she knew that it held the key to escaping the cursed home. She touched the symbol, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, Sarah found herself outside, the old Victorian-style house looming behind her like a silent sentinel. From that day on, Sarah refused to speak of what had happened in the cursed home. But the legend surrounding the house continued to grow, and the darkness that had taken over it remained, waiting for its next victim to enter. And enter its next victim it did. Years after Sarah's escape, a young couple named Michael and Jessica moved into the old Victorian-style house. They were warned of the legends surrounding the house, but they laughed them off as superstition. But as soon as they moved in, they knew that they had made a mistake. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and strange things began to happen. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut with no one around, and they could hear whispers coming from the shadows. They tried to leave, but they found that the door had been sealed shut, trapping them inside. They were trapped in the cursed home, with no escape. As they wandered through the house, they encountered the symbols on the walls. They pulsed with an ominous energy, and Michael and Jessica knew that they had stumbled upon something sinister. They tried to find a way out, but the darkness that had taken over the house seemed to have closed in around them. They were consumed by fear, their minds unraveling as they struggled to survive in the cursed home. But then, they stumbled upon the room that Emily and Sarah had found before them. They saw the symbol on the wall, glowing with a soft, pulsing light, and they knew that it was the key to escaping the cursed home. They touched the symbol, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, they found themselves outside, the old Victorian-style house looming behind them like a silent sentinel. From that day on, Michael and Jessica refused to speak of what had happened in the cursed home. But the legend surrounding the house continued to grow, and the darkness that had taken over it remained, waiting for its next victim to enter. And so the old Victorian-style house remained, a cursed relic of the past. The darkness within it hungered for new victims, waiting patiently for the next curious soul to enter its doors. Years passed, and the old Victorian-style house became a local legend, a place that nobody dared to enter. But the darkness within it remained, waiting for its next victim. One day, a group of teenagers stumbled upon the house. They had heard the legend surrounding it, and they were eager to explore the cursed home. As they entered the house, they could feel the darkness closing in around them. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and the symbols on the walls pulsed with an ominous light. But they pressed on, determined to explore every inch of the cursed home. As they wandered through the house, they began to experience strange phenomena. Doors slammed shut on their own, objects moved of their own accord, and they could hear whispers coming from the shadows. But they refused to be scared off, and they continued to explore, eager to uncover the secrets of the old house. But they soon realized that they had made a grave mistake. One by one, the teenagers began to disappear, consumed by the darkness that had taken over the house. Those that remained were paralyzed with fear, unable to escape the malevolent spirits that hunted them. As the darkness closed in around them, they realized that they had been foolish to enter the house. They had been warned of the horrors that lurked within, but they had not listened. And now, they would pay the ultimate price for their curiosity. In the end, only one teenager remained, a young boy named Jake. He was determined to escape the house, to warn others of the danger that lurked within. He searched frantically for a way out, but the darkness seemed to have closed in around him. Just as he was about to give up hope, he stumbled upon the room that Emily, Sarah, Michael, and Jessica had found before him. He saw the symbol on the wall, glowing with a soft, pulsing light, and he knew that it held the key to escaping the cursed home. He touched the symbol, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, Jake found himself outside, the old Victorian-style house looming behind him like a silent sentinel. From that day on, Jake refused to speak of what had happened in the cursed home. But the legend surrounding the house continued to grow, and the darkness that had taken over it remained, waiting for its next victim to enter. The old Victorian-style house still stood, a cursed relic of the past, waiting patiently for its next curious soul to enter its doors. The end.